Hello everybody, it's Mel. Thank you for joining me today for my January reading wrap-up. So yes, this is going to be the video in which I talk through all the books that I read in January. Couple of disclaimers before we get into the meat of the video, as it were. If you can hear the washing machine or any other background noise in the background, sorry about that, but I'm at that point where I kind of have to just pick the moments that I have a free moment to do the filming, regardless of what's going on in the background. So sorry if the sound quality isn't amazing. I still haven't quite managed to get around to purchasing a new lapel mic, which I am still intending on doing, but this is what we're working with for the moment. But anyway, yes, so this is going to be my January reading wrap-up. So I have got a always fully booked planner for this year, a reading journal, but it's also got some planning extra bits. So each month it's got like your monthly spreads, weekly spreads that you can write out what you're actually planning on doing, which I think is really, really great. It's actually what I was looking for to begin with when I started my whole reading book Bujo adventure, which I really enjoyed, but this year I just thought I don't know that I can fit the time in. I don't know how that's going to go. I was thinking all that when I wasn't sure what kind of baby I would have, and also when I was quite new to the whole concept of parenting a baby. Anyway, the point being, if you want me to go through this and do like a flip through of what I've sort of set up and what some of the spreads are, then I'm more than happy to do that. Please do comment below. I also put up a question in the what is now called just posts tab on my YouTube channel, asking if you want me to do a journal flip through from last year, despite the fact that it's incomplete. Let me know that as well. So comment below and let me know both of those things. But yeah, anyway, I'm happy to go through, but not in this video. That's not what we're here for. We're here for my reading wrap up. So in the month of January, I finished 4 things, and let me just go to the actual section, which is a bit of a wrap up section. Bear with. So yes, I read finished 4 things. I am currently almost at the end of a book that I was in the middle of when the month ended, but I think it's going to have to start count towards February's wrap up now. But anyway, I read 4 things. I gave an average rating of 3.4 stars. I read a total of 1,184 pages. I read 3 books via physical printed versions, and I read 1 book via ebook. My favourite book of the month was The Ending Fire by Sarah L. Arifi. The genres that I read were 1 dystopian, 2 fantastical, and 1 mystery. So that's a little bit of a stats wrap up for you. But let's get into the actual reviews. I normally do this in order of books that I finished, but since I have mentioned it as my favourite book of the month, I will start with The Ending Fire by Sarah L. Arifi. This is actually the 3rd and final book in the Ending Fire trilogy, so I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about what this book is about because I don't want to give any spoilers. But the first book is The Final Strife, and I read that last year. I'm not sure exactly when, but before September anyway. Or perhaps it was even in September. And then I read the second one, which is The Battle Drum, in November, December. Then I read The Ending Fire in January, and I really, really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the entire series. I thought that it was incredibly well written, really clever, really interesting. So as far as I can make out, it is a little bit of an African-inspired fantasy. It is a queer normative world, so anyone wondering what I mean by that, what I mean is that it is queer people, LGBTQIA+ people are considered just normal. So there's none of the hidden queerness that you often get, particularly I've noticed in Western inspired fantasies, because they often are drawing on historical situations. Obviously I don't really know a lot about the culture of Africa, but nonetheless, so like the point being that I don't know whether it's necessarily based on something that was historically accurate for any African cultures. But the point being that there is no conflict about people's queerness. They just are queer. So we have a sapphic relationship between two of our main characters. We have three different sort of genders. So we have two binary genders, and then we have a non-binary gender. I'm guessing realistically actually that we have multiple genders, because they don't specify that they are trans, but we do have mention of characters who aren't necessarily non-binary. Like, it's implied that there are trans characters as well. And I thought that was really well done. It was woven seamlessly into the narrative, so it made it normative. There was no shock value about it or anything like that. It was just discussing when they had a non-binary character, they referred to them as they, he, she. They described the relationship between our two sapphic main characters in the same way as they described the relationship between hetero characters. So I thought that was really well done, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I generally really enjoyed the series. I thought it was incredibly well written. Like I said, it was really interesting. It was quite different from a lot of different fantasy that I've read, because unfortunately the majority of fantasy that I've read has been Western European inspired fantasy. So it was nice to read something that was a little bit different, and something that, yeah, had some different sort of ways of looking at the world, I guess. In the first book, we are following a few different characters. We are in an empire, and I think it's just called the Empire. We have people who have different coloured blood, and they are broken into a class system based on their different coloured blood. And it is believed that, so there's red blood, blue blood, and clear blood, and it's believed that the people who have clear blood are just meant to be servants, and they did some kind of great wrong to the upper class, who are the people with red blood, many, many centuries ago, and for that reason, all people who have clear blood, their hands and their tongue are chopped off and out. And we follow a few different characters who are trying to revolutionize the empire and change that hierarchical system. In book 2 and 3, the world is expanded, and we learn new things about other parts of the world, about other peoples, about other blood types that there are, other colours of blood, and the final book is a sort of end to that story, an end to a different people who have a prophecy, and they try and see that fulfilled, and the change of the empire that they were looking for in the first book. But yeah, like I said, I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well written. I would say that my favourite of the three was the Battle Drum, which is the second book, which is often not the case. Often, people find middle book syndrome, but I didn't think that in this instance. I did like the ending fire a lot. I've heard a lot of people say that the ending fire they didn't think was as strong as the other two, and they didn't necessarily like the ending for the trilogy, which I can understand, given that we start out with this one nation and then we build on the world, and then it kind of doesn't necessarily tie up everything about the world. But I think that's okay, because it does tie up what we first started with and another very important plot that starts up in book 2. But yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I don't really have much else to say about it. It was my favourite book of the month. I gave it 4 stars. I borrowed it from the library, that's why you're seeing it on screen rather than in my hand. It was 450 pages long. I actually gave it 4.1. So I might do a video of this. Again, please comment below if you're interested in seeing my new rating system. So I'm actually not using CawPile anymore. I have found this last couple of years that CawPile just doesn't quite reflect how I think about books in the way that I thought that it would. And I saw on Erin Franklin, let me check. It is actually Erin Smith. I saw on her YouTube channel. So she is actually a bullet journaling channel, but she also does read, and she talks a little bit about reading and her wrap-ups and stuff. And she has come up with a couple of rating systems. The one that I'm using is for fiction, because that's what I read mostly, and it's Peach. It's actually named after one of her cats, but it is P for plot, hang on, sorry, I've written it all down. Let me just go back and find it. P for plot, E for enjoyment, A for artistry, so like the writing style and that sort of thing, C for characters, and H for heart, which is kind of like that, like extra little, like how, yes, you enjoyed it, but like how meaningful was it to you? How much to heart did you feel like the author put into it? That sort of thing, sort of that like that ethereal vibes, I guess. Anyway, so I use that now, and I'm finding it's working really well, and ended up with 4.1, which I've rounded down to 4 stars for The Ending Fire. The first book that I actually read and finished was, well, the first book I read anyway, sorry, the first book I finished anyway, was It Looks Like Us, which by Alison Ames, which I read for, I got the prompt in my TBR game of try a chapter to pick, and so I tried a bunch of different videos, a bunch of different books even, and the first couple of chapters, and I ended up choosing It Looks Like Us by Alison Ames. I will link the vlogs. I did do a vlog of that. I will link that down in the description below so that you can go and see me reading those books and little chapters and figuring out which one I wanted to read, and then the actual, you know, me reading the book and my deeper thoughts on it. It Looks Like Us was actually, I don't know about a rewrite, maybe a retelling of a movie which I cannot remember the name of, but if I think of it, I will pop that in the description. But anyway, it is about a group of teenagers who are recruited by a philanthropist, I guess, entrepreneur businessman who is a billionaire, and he recruits these teenagers and sends them off to the Antarctic to do research, and ostensibly they're doing research looking into how much microplastics are in the ice sheet in Antarctica. But what they're really there to do, as they figure out throughout the book, is to find and capture a creature that exists in Antarctica. And I'm not going to say anything more than that. It is a little bit of, it's definitely horror. It's also a little bit of a dystopian horror. It's young adult. I thought that some of the themes and sort of some of the driving plot storyline was a little bit heavy-handed, but I'm not the target audience. Obviously teenagers are. The characters are a little older. Well, they're teenagers, they're older teenagers, but I would say that it's probably more aimed at sort of middle teens, so sort of 14, 15. But yeah, I really enjoyed it nonetheless. I thought it was fun, I thought it was well written, it was very fast paced. You get into the crux of the story, you get into the intrigue of the story quite quickly, and it moves along at quite a fast pace. Like I said, there are some metaphors which are quite heavy-handed, but again, I'm not the main audience, so if you are targeting at 13, 14-year-olds, then I understand why you need to be potentially a little bit heavy-handed with some of your metaphors in order for it to be understood. Not that teenagers of that age can't understand metaphors or can't understand more nuanced things, but you know, if you've got an agenda, which I felt like this book did, which was fine, it was fine. But yeah, I did enjoy it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. In the rating system I just mentioned, the Peach rating system, it was 3.6, but I rounded down to 3.5. But yeah, overall I enjoyed it. It was one of my TBR books, so that's good. I got a book off my TBR, and I read it physically, so that's the next book that I read. Then I read The Little Prince. Now this is a short story written by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and I have the the Penguin Classics edition that was sent to me by my good friend Alison, and I chose this one because it fitted into the Buzzword cover challenge for the year, for January, with a repeating pattern. But I did really enjoy it. It's a very sweet little story. We follow a little prince who comes from another planet, and his planet is tiny, and you can, like, he loves the sunset, so he watches the sunset all day because he can move his chair around the planet as it moves around and watch the sunset. So you're very aware of the planet moving, and for various reasons he decides that he needs to leave his planet and go explore other parts of the universe, and he goes to a bunch of different planets. and he ends up on Earth. And he meets the narrator of the story, and the narrator of the story has just crashed in the Sahara Desert. So he's very concerned with fixing the engine, fixing the aeroplane, and making his way back to civilization before he dies. The little prince doesn't understand this because he's used to a small planet, and he just starts talking about his experiences and the different places that he's visited, and it's this narrator recounting the Little Prince's story for us. But yeah, like I said, it was very cute, it was very sweet. It is a children's book, children's short story, but I thought it was really sweet and really well done, and yeah, I enjoyed it. I definitely can see why people have loved it and why it's a classic. I ended up giving it 3.2 stars, so I've rounded it down to 3 stars, because although I did enjoy it and I thought it was well written, I thought it was very sweet, it wasn't something that really touched me. Perhaps if I'd read it when I was younger, when I was the target audience, it might have been something that had really touched me and really meant something to me and really moved me, which is I think what the experience that Alison had when she was a child. I have actually read this one before when I was in my 20s, again at the behest of Alison. But I hadn't read it for a long time, so I didn't really remember anything about it. But yeah, I did enjoy it. I don't really have much else to say about it. It's a short story, so I've kind of described it pretty much how it is. So I'll move on to the final book that I finished. Now, I keep saying finished because, as I said before, I was halfway through when the month ended. So the book that I'm halfway through is The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik, and I've counted that towards meaning that I get to not have a punishment for it in February, because I was a quarter of the way through when I made the video, which is what I decided. It's all in my most recent, what's the word I'm looking for? My most recent TBR game, which I will link below, how this all works. But anyway, I counted it towards January, but I can't really talk about it because I haven't finished it yet. I'm almost done, so it'll go in February's wrap up. But anyway, the final book that I actually finished in January was, again, I need my journal, Murder in an English Village by Jessica Ellicott. I didn't actually realise when I picked this out that it was the beginning of a series. However, it is, I believe, a series of companion novels following these two women who become investigators. So it's kind of like detective story of the week episodic setup. So I don't necessarily know that I'll continue with the series. If I come across it at any point, any more of the books, then I will potentially finish it or read some more, but it's not one that I feel like I need to get the next book come through. Like, I don't feel the need to read the series, even though it is the series. I feel like it works as a standalone, if that makes sense. Anyway, Murder in an English Village by Jessica Ellicott. I actually read this one on Everand. I ended up choosing it because I decided I didn't want to read She Who Became the Sun. I've been reading books on my phone, not just audio, but ebooks on my phone quite a bit recently, because I find that the phone's a lot easier, as you'd imagine, to hold when I'm also holding the baby. So if I'm feeding them, or, you know, they're asleep on me, then I will pick up the phone and read a book while that's happening. So anyway, I swapped it out for She Who Became the Sun because it was suggested to me by Goodreads, recommended to me. So I ended up reading on an Everand. It is a cozy mystery set in an English village, very much like your Miss Marple by Agatha Christie. Not as good as anything written by Agatha Christie at all, unfortunately, but very much that kind of thing. So we follow these two older women. They're in their, I'd say they're in their like late 50s, early 60s. They were friends at school. One of them is an adventuress, so it's set in sort of the 1940s, 50s. No, it'd be set in the 1930s, because they talk about the First World War but not the Second World War, I believe. I could be wrong. Either way, it's following a few years after one of the world wars. I realise there are other wars. Yeah, so it's following these two women. One of them is this adventuress who has been in lots of different news articles, newspapers, because she does all sorts of crazy things that women aren't necessarily supposed to do, which makes me think that, yes, I'm correct, it is after the First World War. And then we follow her old school friend who lives in this small little English village and has kind of always followed the rules, and, you know, just lives a nice quiet little life with her dog in this little English village. She is running out of money, so she puts an ad in the paper for a roommate or housemate essentially, or a boarder as they would have said those days. Her old friend Beryl sees it, and so Beryl decides to go and say, yes, I'll live with you. They get involved in this investigation. But yeah, I thought it was good. It wasn't particularly amazing. Like I said, it was a inferior, sorry, but inferior Agatha Christie, but that same kind of golden age of detective, cute little cozy mystery type thing. But yeah, so like I said, I had a good fun time with it. It was easy to read, and you know, if you're looking for something that is in that sort of vein that you're going to enjoy, not necessarily blow you away, but you're going to enjoy, you're going to have fun passing the time with, I would recommend it. So I gave this one, ended up being a 2.8 when I did the peach, and then so you do peach and then you kind of like core pile. So you give plot a rating, etc. And when it came to heart, I couldn't really, it didn't have any particular vibe or any feeling for me, so I gave that a 2. So it ended up with 2.8, but I'm going to round that up to 3 because I did think it was well written. But anyway, yeah, it was something that was, you know, easy enough to read and fun enough to follow. It was a book that I read. I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to continue the series, but I also wouldn't say don't read it, if that makes sense. So anyway, those are all the books that I read and finished in the month of January. Let me know in the comments whether you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Let me know what you read in the month of January. What was your favourite book that you read in the month of January? Any other comments that you'd like to leave, please do so down in the comments below. If you'd like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me something that gives me that small town English village vibe. Whatever it is that you think does that in the emojis. And yeah, that's everything that I have to say today. So I'm going to leave you now. But thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.